Hello and welcome to the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. We bring you interviews from people who have conquered the trickiest of health challenges using the functional diagnostic nutrition philosophy and similar healing modalities. You're going to hear from experts who have been through the ringer with their health issues and yet managed to come out on the other side. You can always visit us at functionaldiagnosticnutrition.com, but for now, here is today's episode. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 406 of the Health Detective Podcast. And I was laughing with my guest beforehand because we were both having some background mishaps. So if it's your first time tuning in, you might not even know different. You might think, oh, does Ev just do the black background thing? No, we got all this fancy equipment that should be finalized finally this weekend, but that's God willing, because every time I think I'm a step ahead with this stuff, I am not. And I think some of the people that are in FDN think, oh, well, he's, late 20s. He should know this tech stuff. The videography side and the cameras and the lighting and all this stuff that people do, I have a newfound respect for it. I already thought it was a skill, but this is absolutely a skill, and I can see why photographers and videographers make a lot of money per hour, because it is a pain in the butt to learn all this stuff. But then our guest pops on and she's having the same issues with the virtual background, so she is live from the infrared sauna. I pray to God it's not on while we're doing this, otherwise it'll be a very short podcast. If you're on audio listening to this a couple of weeks later, you won't even get to see this, but if you ever want to check us out on YouTube, you can always check the show notes, and we have a link to every podcast, the video version in our audio. So I will read her bio here and we will get into this. Dr. Lara May is an advanced practical clinical pharmacist that specializes in functional medicine and energy medicine. She has worked in emergency rooms and adult acute care for 15 years, counseling nurses, doctors, patients, and families about medication regimens and maximizing treatment outcomes. Due to her struggle with her own health, she started studying and practicing Reiki and energy medicine in 2014, then functional medicine in 2016. Her passion has since grown from Band-Aid medicine into empowering women to truly heal themselves on the physical, mental, and spiritual levels. Now, as a functional medicine health coach, she has expanded her practice to encompass intuitive healing and functional medicine together. I think that's a great mix, with the intention of empowering the healing of her clients on multiple levels to restore their health and happiness. That was one sentence. She moved to Lake Tahoe. That's got to be sweet. After completing her residency in clinical pharmacotherapy in 2009, and in her spare time is an avid backcountry athlete enjoying snowboarding, snowmobiling, hiking, trail running, and hunting with her 2 hound dogs. Well, you're in the right place for those activities. Welcome to the show. Thanks for being here.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited for today.
Cool. So before we get, I know the title, guys, and we're going to get into this specifically, I promise, the diabetes side of things, but you also have a personal health journey that involves certainly more than that. So I actually like to start off with the same question when someone has had a health journey and comes to our podcast, which is 98% of our guests. I'd love to know, what were your first symptoms like? What did they look like? And when did they begin? When did you first realize something was going wrong?
Well, I was actually diagnosed with IBS when I was 23. But back then, there was only one prescription medication on the market, and I didn't want to go that direction. And so my doctor essentially said, well, then you can manage it with food and nutrition and lifestyle modifications, but that was it. There was no, he's like, oh, you could try aloe vera juice and that should help, calm down your gut issues. And so I sort of just moved on from there and was like, oh, this is just something I'm going to have to suck up and deal with. Fast forward to, I think, 2012, and then into 14. The stress with my job, being a shift worker at that point, I was working graveyards, and everything, I think, just came to a head. I'd always suffered with migraines, but they were coming like fast and furious and starting to become debilitating. So I remember one night at work, and for pharmacists that work graveyards, you're there by yourself, and you are lucky if you have a technician to help you, like one person. as sort of your backup, but they're not a pharmacist, so they can't by law do all the things that you're required to do. So I'm laying on the floor with all the lights off in this hospital pharmacy. So, not the cleanest surface on the planet. It's cold and hard, but when you have a migraine, that's sometimes all you want is just something nice and cool and dark. And so I just thought to myself, I'm like, I can't keep doing this. Like I'm stuck here till my colleague comes in at 7 a.m. There's, no one to call and no one to help me. And this is just not, this isn't a way to, number one, do my job, number two, live my life. And so at that point, I started seeking out other options, excuse me, because I had been to my PCP. And again, there wasn't a lot of answers from the Western medicine side of things. It was just, here's another prescription. And so I was already on at least 3 agents for my headache regimen. And I was maxing out all of the over-the-counter options for my gut. And I had tried the aloe vera juice, and I'm like, well, I mean, it can only do so much. So, I just went down the rabbit hole of what can I do to help myself? Obviously, I'm going to have to take responsibility here. And I think that's probably the thing that I've brought forward in my practice the most, is that we are the creators of our health. No one else is. And this is even what I tell my clients too, like, I am your guide and I'm here to, sort of guide you and steer you along the journey, but you're the one that is making the changes, implementing what we're talking about. This is your journey. I can't do the work for you. And, really empowering that self-responsibility with our health.
That's a concept we get into all the time here. And we actually talk about it on the business side too, because we get a lot of practitioners that have to become entrepreneurial if they want to do this as work. And I believe this is true for both things, a health journey and a business journey. It's a personal development thing, right?
Yeah.
You cannot be the same person on the other side of chronic disease. If you have actually reversed conditions and you had autoimmune or gut issues or whatever it might be, and now you no longer have those because of the changes that you made, you are also a changed person. So it's hard because of that. It's doubly hard, but you get this amazing benefit where it's like this transformed individual on the other side. There's another thing I wanted to go to really quick, because I know that you do podcasting and obviously you're also a guest a lot. So this might not even be as big of a point for you anymore, but this is such a big point for me as an interviewer and something I always want to emphasize on this show. So you kind of had this seemingly like wake up call moment, right? I mean, it's almost like a movie, and I hate that people go through them, but I love when they live to tell the story. And it's like, I can totally picture you laying on one of those like medical type floors, just feeling like crap, lights off, alone, and just saying enough's enough. But I feel like there still had to be another step here. And I want to just dive in a little deeper. So what I mean by that is you are trained to be a pharmacist. So you are about as Western as you could possibly be. I would imagine it has to be extremely tough to break that paradigm and say, I do need something more. Maybe you weren't even trained on that stuff, but you have to think outside the box if you're ever going to get better. So were there any initial influences that you can think of, or a book that you came across that led you to saying, I'm going to go try something more natural, or gosh forbid, energy medicine? Because that's a pretty big jump for most people from being something like a pharmacist.
Sure. So I had been exposed to Reiki growing up here and there through friends and acquaintances, just superficially. Actually, my best friend had been through an animal communication and animal Reiki course, and while she was going through that, we talked a lot about it. And so even though I hadn't been through that myself yet, I had this awareness that something like that existed and was available. And so when I had maxed out all of my options in the pharmaceutical and Western medicine realm, I thought, well, maybe there's, at least from even just like the relaxation perspective and the stress relief perspective. So was my first in, and my first sort of dip my toe in. And then, through a series of those sessions, and if anyone's ever had a Reiki session, normally, yes, you have the relaxation piece, but usually there are messages that come through, or the practitioner that you're working with will, say something either in the session or at the end that usually is sort of like another aha, like
Mhm.
sort of like starts to peel back the layer of the onion or the petals of the lotus flower, however you want to envision it. And so that's what started to happen. And I started to get more curious. And then in terms of like the supplement side of things and the more natural approach to things, I had some supplement education in pharmacy school. But again, that was very much from the perspective of, well, these are the supplements that have been researched the most and that we know will have interactions with these, pharmaceutical medications. So again, very superficial, not a deep dive. But I had been hearing and reading Dr. Mark Hyman's books and Dr. Josh Axe. And so I had been exposed and again, just enough to pique my curiosity to also see the science behind it and know that it wasn't woo-woo. And so that's also like what I do like on my show and in the content that I put out there too, is I like to bring in, the physics, the metaphysics, and reinforce that, yes, there is this energetic, this ethereal, non-tangible aspect of our being and our health, but it's also intricately linked to science, and it's been proven, and we know that it exists, and it's, been verified with research and evidence base and all of these, words that we like to use in the scientific field to prove something is, valid. So yeah, does that
No, it
sort of.
absolutely does. And I appreciate you understanding where I'm coming from, because I could see you smile when I first asked it. And again, it's like, to us, once we're 10 years into this, I got into this in 2014, 2015 myself. We almost forget how profound these things are to other people. Like when we're saying this out loud, oh yes, I had all this stuff, feel a lot better now. Now I help people, reverse these conditions that they live with every single day through their own, through educating them in their own self actions. They're the ones doing it, right? And it becomes a privilege to be able to just say this so nonchalantly nowadays. But the reality is 99% of people don't even really understand what we do, and definitely do not understand that they can benefit from it. So I appreciate it. I'm curious and fascinated actually by these little things that happen in our life that get us into this space, because I'm a highly skeptical person. I wasn't even old enough to be getting into college for some type of science related thing when I was sick, but I would have been the person that was like, just show me data and all this. I'm going to follow the mainstream stuff. I'm not going to think outside the box at all. And I have a huge respect for someone that can be trained in not only a traditional way, but like, again, about as Western as you could get, and still just be open-minded enough to hear what your friend said and take it somewhat seriously. Because there's plenty of people, and you know this probably as well as I do, that would hear what their friend's doing, especially now that we're bringing in the animals into it. Reiki's one thing. When we start throwing the animals into it, it's like, you might like your friend, but that does not mean you're humoring them at all in their beliefs. So for you to have that respect for them, at least to some degree, to be like, I'm going to listen to this, I'll look into this a little
Mhm.
deeper. I think we need more people who think like you. I think that's really cool. So when did you decide then, during this journey, that this was what you wanted to do when you grow up, and that you would, still have this wisdom that you got from your years and years of training, right? This isn't an easy degree to pull off. I'm sure you were training for many, many years. How did you decide that I'm now going to integrate this and actually want to do this as work, as opposed to just being, I have this as a personal testimonial, I'll talk about it, but I'll still go do my normal 9 to 5, or in your case, I guess, what was that? Probably at 11 to 7 or
Like
something like that.
9 to 7.
Oh, geez. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. So none of this I would have ever expected if you had asked me, especially when I was 18 graduating from high school. That was not not even like pharmacy wasn't even on my radar at that stage of the game. At that stage of the game, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian. And so when I talk about that animal communication or animal Reiki, you're right. Like, wow, like, but for me, I'd always had a relationship with animals and felt very close to them. So I knew on some level that there is this soul piece. Like we are sentient beings and there's more to us than just, the hydrogen, carbon, nitrogen, oxygen, all of those molecules that make up what we are. And if any of you out there have ever had a pet or have had some sort of interaction with an animal, I'm sure you've also felt that connection. So I think that's sort of what opened me up to it and made it even, like you said, possible to entertain the idea. But then, yeah, from there, it was a very traditional educational path, undergrad degree. I took 4 years off between undergrad and pharmacy school, and then decided to say, okay, yes, this is how I want to do it, and ended up in residency. And again, very Western, very traditional, very allopathic. But I always did have a curiosity, and I always have had this relationship with nature. Being raised in the foothills of the Great Smoky Mountains, the Appalachian Mountain Range. I'm from East Tennessee. And so I guess maybe that's why it was easier for me to sort of weave this path, together and understand that there is this connection. And now when I bring it forward again, I guess I feel like I'm kind of a translator between the two, helping people understand. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like you said, but I never would have expected that this would have been where I ended up. But just to also answer your question, what was the inception of I've decided to take this step intentionally?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it had to do with that one moment in the pharmacy with that migraine. And so that sort of, after I started diving through and looking for resources, and also looking at like, what are the credentials that the people that I'm seeking out to help me, what are the credentials that they have? And so one of the programs I looked at was FDN. I also looked at IIN, the Institute for Integrative Nutrition, and that's the path I ended up going at the time. And then ultimately Functional Medicine University for that advanced level training.
Mm-hmm.
But, it was just a matter of what was going to fit for me, and it's everyone has, obviously their own path and their own journey. And so I encourage everyone out there to look at all the pieces, talk to people, ask them, and, because there's a lot of options these days.
Yep. All right. So I know this wasn't even the main point of your answer, but you got me. You probably saw the smile on my face when you said East Tennessee. I've spent a good amount of time now in like the Gatlinburg area, but not just Gatlinburg, right? Like all that, just the rural awesomeness outside of the Smokies. During the pandemic, I spent a month in very far west North Carolina, and we go to the Smokies like on the weekends. That is, guys, you gotta go there. There's a reason that the Smokies is the most visited national park each year. It's because it is like, especially Gatlinburg and the Smokies, it's like the best of both worlds. But make sure you go outside of that too, because I don't know. I want property there. I can't wait. So anyway, let's get into the diabetes side of this then, because this is what's interesting for me. I still don't fully understand why this ended up being a huge passion for you, because that's not, it doesn't seem to be, at least part of your story from what you've said. So how do you now end up working with people with this metabolic disease or diabetes? Where do we even begin with that? So sorry, I don't want to go two questions on you. I'm getting better at this because I've done this for a lot of people.
I can answer them all.
Thank you. All right. Well then, please.
So my grandmother actually died of complications of diabetes. And it wasn't from a lack of being compliant, as we say in the Western medicine world. When we have a quote unquote good patient, they take all their medication and they do all the things that we tell them to do. She was a compliant patient, but it's just the nature of the disease and the inflammation and the damage that it does to the body over time. So I did grow up seeing that. But personally, as part of my inflammation sort of blew up over time, one of the metabolic things that was going on in my body was insulin resistance. And I was in my early 30s, and I knew that, number one, this was not appropriate for my age. And number two, if I didn't do something about it, it was going to end badly. And so I was able to reverse my own insulin resistance with diet and lifestyle, no medications needed. And so again, that happened. Wonderful. I moved on, really focused in on the gut healing side of things, because that was the big most present thing in my healing journey in terms of like my education and where I wanted to focus with functional medicine. But then the pandemic came and I was still working in the hospital, and the people that I saw not coming out of the hospital, coming in and not coming out at all, were those with diabetes. They were overweight and they had diabetes, and those were the ones that had the highest rates of mortality. And so I thought, I was like, well, it's reversible. Like, this is low hanging fruit. Like, why do we have so many people that are just not doing well with this, inflammation process in this disease state? And so that's where I've even decided to redirect my practice at that point and say, it should not be this hard for people to get a handle on this piece of their metabolic health.
Sure. All right. So then, in terms of getting into the specifics of it, I think one question I want to ask directly, right? So it's not a complete clickbait title. Can diabetes be reversed? I think one thing that we need to specify here is the difference between type 1 and type 2.
Yeah.
I definitely have gotten, if I word it incorrectly, the type 1s come in and they start chiming up, and I
Right.
totally respect that. I'm not being rude to them at
Absolutely.
all. It's a very different thing, and I get this. So I would assume you're referring to type 2.
Yes.
And then I'd love to know and ask directly, do you believe that type 2 diabetes is something that if the person were to do the right things, is this something that can be reversed the majority of the time? Are there certain parts, like to your point, can it be too late in the game? That's what I always kind of wonder, because I've seen people reverse it. We've had people on the show that's done that. So that's not a question. But what I'm wondering is this something that can be done the majority of the time if the person were to just start the right steps all of a sudden?
Especially at the early phases, yes. So especially if you are pre-diabetic, you are already seeing trends of insulin resistance in your lab work, then it absolutely can be reversed. If you're to the point where you're experiencing neuropathy and maybe already have some early kidney damage and or, damage to your eyesight, it probably not totally, but that doesn't mean that you can't still like really, reverse a lot of the inflammation that's happening in the body and at least slow it down, if not totally reverse course. So with all inflammation in all disease states, there's a spectrum. But I want to give people hope, and again, I'm all about empowerment. So yeah.
So I understand that there's stuff that you do one-on-one with a person that we probably can't fully get into today, but what are some of the first steps then that someone could take? Maybe they clicked on this, and we have a bunch of new people, thank God, that just came in subscriber-wise because of an event that we just did 2 weeks ago. So there's going to be people listening to this. This might be one of the first podcasts of ours, at least, that they've ever tuned into in 400 episodes, and they have this. They're ready to make the change. They're motivated, feeling good. And they're like, what the heck are the first steps? So is there a standard place that you typically start with someone, or is it completely individualized?
No, there's, especially with insulin resistance and or early pre-diabetes or even, newly diagnosed type 2, food is medicine. I mean, and that's really the core of functional medicine in general, is food is medicine. And so I always start with food sensitivity testing, nutrient deficiency testing, and toxic burden. Because if your body is inflamed and toxic, then there are things we can do, and food is still powerful, but it's just going to be that much harder. So we want to know, like, what's the toxic burden load in your body, and we test for that. And then we want to know, where are you nutrient deficient, and we test for that. So again, one of the mottos of functional medicine is test, don't guess. And then also too, what are your food sensitivities? Because even if you're, quote, eating healthy, but you're eating foods that are ramping up that inflammation, then, you're not doing yourself in really that many favors. You're still sort of working uphill and against the grain or against the current, so to speak. And then beyond that, we look at stress management, because if you're stressed and your cortisol is elevated, and or you're to the point where you're in full adrenal fatigue and you're not even, building that cortisol response, then again, that is directly related to your blood glucose management in your body. And so there's a lot of things that, again, they're based in physiology, science. We know exactly how these functions work in the body. And so it's just a matter of figuring out for each client where's the breakdown for them, or where is that insult coming from that we then need to address. And again, it's root cause medicine. So this is not about a band-aid. This is not about a quick fix. It's not even about like, oh, just do this for, 6 to 12 weeks. And then, then you can quote, go back to what you were doing before. No, this is about a lifestyle change. It's about a commitment. And what clients learn with me when they work with me, and or hopefully any other functional medicine practitioner, are the tools to take them forward through the rest of their life, so that they don't end up back at a square one situation.
And what you just said, there's the personal development journey, right? Almost anyone can do something for 6 weeks, at least most things we can do for 6 weeks. But to say, hey, no, this is now who I am, that's a shift in identity, right? So really cool. One thing I didn't hear you say, I mean, you did say diet's powerful, so I don't want to underplay that either, but you didn't start listing off macronutrient ratios, keto, all this kind of stuff. So is it that you assume that, hey, no, looking at macros is a given, or do you actually not consider that top priority for people with insulin resistance?
No, macros is definitely important. But again, I don't believe it's one size fits all. So I will never start 100% of my clients on keto. Honestly, I think keto is a little much for most people, especially when they're just starting on their journey. So it depends on where you are in your journey, what you've tried before, what is your movement practice like, how active are you, how old are you? If you're female, where are you in your cycle stages? Meaning, like, are you perimenopausal, menopausal, postmenopausal? So there's a lot of variables that go into this. If you're, I do work with men too, although the majority of the clients I work with are female. And so macros are super important. I definitely do lower carb for sure. I have to unteach the ADA regulations for eating and guidelines for eating, because even it drives me nuts, even in the hospital for a quote unquote carb control diet, they start out with 50 grams of carbs per meal. They're just, I can't.
And just so people don't miss that, you said per meal. So at least 150 per day then.
Yeah. Come on. That is like, anyway, I'm not going to go off on that. So anyway, we do start low carb, not keto. Again, because this is a change. There's a lot happening, especially within that first 4-week period. And I know it can be overwhelming. And so I don't want my clients to be overwhelmed. I want this to be something that's implemented and long lasting. And so we start with stages. And then once we're to like the third, maybe the second month, but definitely the third month, now we're looking at protein intake and how much protein are you taking in relative to how much you're working out. And because the protein guidelines, even the most updated ones with they actually just they're coming out. If they are not out yet, they've already come out with 2025 new guidelines. The protein is still very underwhelming. And to me, in my personal opinion, and you'll hear this a lot if you listen to a lot of different functional medicine practitioners, especially for women, we need to make sure we're keeping our muscle mass up as we age. And it gets harder as we age because of just the natural hormone challenges. So we need to be lifting heavy things and eating enough protein support lifting those heavy things. And so we look at that too. So yes, to answer your question, so that was a long answer, but macros are important.
I love the long answer. Yeah.
And healthy fats. And so I'm not afraid of fat. Fat helps you feel satiated longer. Fat is great for your brain if you're experiencing any brain fog. We need to look at, are you actually eating enough fat? And is it the right kind? Yes. And that also comes up, one more thing. When because a lot of my clients come to me and they're like, oh, my doctor wants me to go on a statin. I really don't want to. Do I really need this? And so I do, even though we work a lot with the insulin resistance, cholesterol is intimately connected with that. And so there's a lot of education that goes into that too. And so it's like, well, we don't have to do a statin if you can, address these numbers. And then I usually do a deep dive too. If a cholesterol panel and a statin is one of the things they're most concerned about, then usually I do that in-depth functional medicine, cardio, metabolic panel that Western medicine just doesn't do. And so we look deeper into that, figure out, again, where's the inflammation? What do we need to do? Is it familial? Is it lifestyle? Is it diet? All those things. Okay, now, sorry, I'm done.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry. I was only going to say we're at 30 minutes in. We have quite a few of you guys on. So at this point, especially if you're new to the show, this is normally when we open up questions from the audience. I have plenty of questions still. I'm just saying, if you guys do have any, please feel free to put them in the chat and we will ask her directly. I want to instantly go back, though, to that thing about the relationship between cholesterol and this diabetes thing. Are you saying that if someone is insulin resistant, you're normally seeing issues with their cholesterol, or did I misunderstand that?
Oh, no, they are intimately connected. So I'm not saying across the board, but sometimes because sometimes it presents itself sort of backwards, meaning that the problem that they'll see first is the cholesterol panel, and they'll be told like, oh no, your blood glucose is fine. And it might be quote unquote fine within the reference range, but that doesn't mean it's optimized. And if you look at the trend, it's most likely that you're trending up. So we know that the way cholesterol is metabolized is intimately connected with how much circulating blood glucose you have and that relationship with your liver health. And that definitely comes down to stress and food. And so we need to look at all those things. And again, Western medicine just doesn't look deep enough. And we have this ingrained protocol and guidelines that just don't look at the whole piece. And it is what it is. But there's more to learn, and we can figure out where we need to address the issue from looking at both the blood glucose trends and the more in-depth cardiometabolic panel.
Okay, very cool. I'm not surprised by that, but I don't actually think that I knew that. And I'm also thinking in my head, because I know a lot of people will argue about, well, there's this meta-analysis that shows that if certain parts of your cholesterol are high, it's actually a little bit better for you and all this kind of stuff. And then it's making me wonder, well, how many people with high cholesterol also have extremely high blood sugar or insulin resistance? And then how much or how many of their issues that come from the insulin resistance are now being blamed on the cholesterol side as well? I'm not saying you should have sky high cholesterol. That's not what I'm saying at all. But it is interesting because if those two are intimately related, it'd be kind of hard to tell exactly what is leading to the cardiovascular event or the stroke or whatever might be happening. So interesting that you brought that up. We have someone that asked, can we talk about exogenous ketones as a strategy? Well, I know that you had already said that ketosis itself might be, maybe a keto diet's actually too stressful or too much for people when they're starting out. Does exogenous ketones have any validity in your work?
Yeah, they can definitely help, especially metabolically, sort of getting our body into that fat burning mode. So there is, that period of, well, we want the body to go from being a sugar burner to a fat burner, especially because most people's goal is also to lose a little weight along the way, ideally, if that's not in their primary goal set as well. And so the way we do that, we can definitely use exogenous ketones. However, if you're going to use the exogenous ketones, I would recommend that you definitely be heading more keto with your eating style, intermittent fasting, to really maximize the utility of it. So if you're just like eating paleo, for example, but not really paying attention to your macros, then I would suggest, to reassess, and hone in. So it also, and the reason I say quote unquote stressful is because, again, it depends on how self-educated the client is when they get to me and what have they tried? How has it gone? So maybe they've tried keto, but they couldn't, stay consistent with it. Or maybe they didn't try the exogenous ketones, or maybe they're a female and now we know like the more research has been done with female specific doing keto, we need to cycle in and out of it. Unlike a man can just be pretty consistent on a daily basis with staying there if they want to and they're comfortable with that. But that could actually be detrimental for a female. So there's a lot of variables, but yes.
Thank you. Interestingly enough, as I did keto for a while, and I do agree with you that it can be overdone just like anything else. I felt phenomenal for a very long time doing it. I was strong, lean, like energetic, all that. And then, all good things must come to an end. And I'm like, okay, well, my goal now, just from a personal perspective, is I want to, if I don't eat for 16 hours, I would like to know that my body's at least producing some meaningful amount of ketones, right? And if I were to use my keto meter, I could find some blood ketones actually happening with a decent glucose level, right? That's really my goal now, because before, when I started out, when I fasted for a while, or even just a little bit, I was just pissed off, hangry, and my body was not responding the way that it should. So I definitely, everything kind of gets taken to the extreme in health, and then people kind of pull back. You're even seeing a lot of the carnivore folks now, right? They're now incorporating honey, certain fruits, all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
So um, I'm sure I fell victim to this stuff as well outside of keto, but I try to stay away from the trends. So Tracy, great question here. I think she kind of almost beat me to this when I was talking about the cholesterol thing. So she said, my integrative doctor says high cholesterol is not that dangerous. What do you deem high cholesterol? And to the point, it's dangerous. Of course, guys, I should have said this earlier. This is not medical advice. So if you
Right.
answer this is just your opinion, and you're speaking generally, this is not literally advice that they should be taking for themselves without consulting their doctor.
Yes, absolutely. But I do also want to sort of maybe reiterate that I agree. Just because your cholesterol panel is high from an allopathic medicine perspective doesn't necessarily mean for you that it is indicative of a, you know, cardio event coming, upon you. Like, how do I say this? Excuse me. Because we've seen in the literature, so this is allopathic Western medicine, pharmacotherapy literature. People with low cholesterol have cardiac events. People with quote unquote high cholesterol have cardiac events. So for the Western medicine side, if your triglycerides are over 200, that's considered high. If your total cholesterol is over 200, that's considered high. But we know that HDL, which I mean, I'm trying to get away from the whole concept of good and bad cholesterol because your body needs all cholesterol to function.
Mhm.
One of the reasons that we actually start to have some neurological like brain fog and forgetfulness and degeneration is because those cells, our brain needs fat to function. So one of the reasons you feel so good on keto is because you've ramped up your fat intake, you've lowered your sugar intake, and now when your body is going through its metabolism, your brain's getting all the food that it needs. And that's one of the reasons you feel so good. So again, one of the things that the statins do is they lower thing, and sometimes they actually lower it too much. And so if you're on a statin and you start to feel the brain fog, or you start to notice that you're, neurologically just not feeling right, I would definitely go back to your doctor and let them know that you're having these symptoms, because one of the documented side effects of long-term statin use is diabetes development, so glucose intolerance, and Alzheimer's development. And again, this is documented. I'm not saying anything that's not already in the literature. So these are just things to be aware of too. So I'm not totally 100% against statins. I also just don't think they need to be in the water.
It's reasonable. I think that's fair. We just have a comment here, and I appreciate this contribution to the conversation. So Tara said she's carnivore and high cholesterol but low triglycerides, and she did a CAC score, and it's 0. Our hormones need, I think she meant her hormones need fat. She said, I'm 40 and my bio age is 29. Well, that is awesome, and I think as long as you keep tracking stuff and stay up to date with your testing, then people like FDNs or people that would even watch a show like this, I think we're going to be fine, right? If we're
Yeah.
going to experiment though in ways that we do need to reflect on this, even the carnivore movement, guys, that is a percent of the population, a small percent that is actually doing that consistently. I would even argue the same thing with a lot of the vegans. It might be more popular overall, but that is not a lot of people that are actually vegan. So whenever I've done these, I do consider them experiments. I just make sure I'm staying up to date on my tests and stuff like that. And I'm testing way more often than I normally would, because the reality is you'll catch the stuff long before it's probably an issue. But no, this is me personally, would I ever go do vegan or carnivore for 10 years straight and not run any tests? I could never do that. That'd be insane to me. And I would not do that at all. You couldn't pay me enough money to do it. And to Tara's point though, I got to validate this. So I had high cholesterol with, well, high-ish cholesterol with high triglycerides when I was 18. And when I did keto Tara, same thing as you. My cholesterol actually, it normalized a little bit, but it still trended high from a Western perspective. And my triglycerides plummeted though, and they were totally within a healthy range. So really cool. I also wanted to add this to the conversation. So it's a question for you as well, though. One of the things that, well, you know how we all have like our little sub passions in this functional medicine space? Like you have your topics that you're super interested in. Mine's like circadian biology and light. I find this stuff super fascinating. And this is a belief, guys, so it's not something that I can prove fully yet, but it is known that when light hits our skin, we do use cholesterol to help make our hormones. That's real. But I sometimes believe that one of the reasons we're seeing people with such high cholesterol is because many people are light deficient. And I do wonder what would happen if everyone was living as our ancestors did, getting light consistently. Would that regulate some of these levels for us? I don't know. I tend to think so. And so my question with this, though, is how much, if at all, do you focus on the circadian rhythm and circadian biology side for people with insulin resistance? Because I have been fascinated by the fact that if you work night shift, you could eat the same exact thing, and yet you're probably going to have a higher risk for a type 2 diabetes diagnosis. We know that people that are in strong sun with high UV become more insulin sensitive, almost as if nature was designed perfectly. And it knows that when you're in that high UV sun, what else are you near? You're probably near crops, right? And fruits and stuff that would grow in strong sun. So before I get too far off here, because you can see how excited I get, I just want to know, do you ever focus on this circadian rhythm side with your clients?
Absolutely. So that's part of the stress management arm of it that I alluded to earlier. But yes, that's absolutely a piece of it. Not only because of my own experience as a shift worker, but because I am still in the Western medicine realm as an employee. I work a lot with nurses and other healthcare practitioners as clients too. And that's one of the things that we talk about. Even if you can't get off that graveyard schedule right now financially, what can we do to make sure you're as regulated as possible? And using other tools for that light exposure. So whether it's red light therapy or having, a light at your desk because yes, the skin is super important, and that is how our body actually makes vitamin D and some of those other biological, physiological reactions. But it's all about the eyeball too. So actually getting those correct light wavelengths into your eye is super important. So even sometimes just integrating that and being intentional with it, I think that's a big piece of a lot of what we do as coaches and practitioners within this realm is taking some of the stuff that I'm sure a lot of you out there as consumers have heard and putting it into practice and making it intentional and connecting those dots of the why am I doing this and then seeing the real-time benefits for yourself.
Thank you so much for specifying the part about the eyeball because when the pandemic happened, I mean, it seems like there was a shift for you. There was certainly a shift for me. My main job actually outside of this is speaking in schools. So that went away for a little bit. And I started taking on a lot more clients because of it. And I would tell the clients, like, you want to catch sunrise every day, all this kind of stuff. Like I had this rule with them where I said, because they didn't believe me that they were going to bed at like 2 a.m., waking up at 10. They're like, there's no way I can ever be a morning person. So I said, this is your only rule. If you can humor me on this, you're going to wake up with the sunrise, set the alarm. I don't care how late you went to bed, and you're allowed to go back in and nap afterwards for all I care. But all we got to do is go get some sun for 10 to 15 minutes. And then within like 2 to 3 weeks, everyone always came back to me and said that they regulated, so they didn't even need the alarm. But what the funniest part was, and I learned to start emphasizing this in my consults with them, is they'd be on Instagram. They're like, tagging me, like, shout out to Evan Transu getting morning sunlight. And they have sunglasses on. Like they're wearing their sunglasses for their Instagram story. I'm like, okay, we actually need that sun. So we're not going to go out in full winter coats and hats and sunglasses. You might as well just go enjoy inside. I guess you're getting better air quality, but that's about it. I'm like, we actually need to be exposed to that light, believe it or not. And just so you guys know, even these, like, I don't wear, I mean, I really only need these to like read on the computer, but I don't wear my glasses outside because it blocks UV light. So this is something that you need to just be aware of. And there's a lot of cool advances now that are coming out. I wish I knew the dang brand. I want to have them on. There's contacts that don't block UV. There's a brand now that doesn't do that, which I'm like,
oh, cool.
So smart. Yep. All right. We have another thing here. So Vicky, I'm happy to take this. This is definitely, just so you know, clearly a personal health question. So I'm going to reframe the question a little bit for our guest here. So let me reframe it for you. If someone had Addison's disease and they're taking hydrocortisone and now they have type 2 diabetes, which seems to be influenced by that medicine, I feel like you would have to know a lot more about this person. But is there any advice that you would give that? Let's say that was you. What advice might you give to yourself?
If that were me, again, I would start with diet and exercise. So being as low carb as I could tolerate. And again, listen to your body. If your body is okay with keto, then definitely do that, cycle in and out of it, depending on where you are. I don't know how old you are and where you are in life stages, but again, being cognizant of that and then making sure that you're lifting heavy things. So we know that long bouts of cardio can actually metabolically not be as good as we thought it was. So maybe convert that exercise ratio to more heavy lifting. And honestly, you'll notice that your workouts are much more efficient when you transition to that. Make sure you're getting enough light, that you're still outside doing gentle walking exercises. So still getting some of that zone 2 in, because actually they've now studied and we know that zone 2 workouts also are metabolically fantastic for us. So this is going to be a story of you really fine-tuning your metabolic health and balance with food, with exercise. And then I would also try to work with your physician or whoever that is prescribing that hydrocortisone for you, and try to taper down as low as you can to also balance your symptoms. And but also making sure, like, how is your thyroid? How are your sex hormones? We want to look at the whole picture. Again, with functional medicine, we look at the whole body, not just the one system. So we want to make sure we're keeping an eye on how are those other systems responding to this, and making sure that you're balanced in all ways.
Great answer. Thank you. All right, we'll take one or two more here, and then we're going to be wrapping this up. So we will talk about, obviously, where you guys can find her. Celia, we'll take your question, though. What would you consider low carb personally? Under 100 grams, 50 grams?
So low carb for a total daily, under 50 grams. And then keto, obviously, like you're looking at like 20, 25.
Yes.
Anything less than 30.
What's nuts is, and I know that you mentioned this a million times, I just want people to know, assuming that they are healthy enough and their stress is managed enough that they actually can work out relatively regularly. I've always been a leaner person, but it was nuts. Like when I did my biking and strength training, like I always do stuff, but I'm in a different phase right now where I'm not like biking or anything. I'd be able to get away with like 75 grams of carbs in a day, and I would test my ketones. And I'm not talking like 0.5. I'd be sitting at like 1 or 1.2 a lot of the day. And now, again, this is someone who had done it for years and eventually think I have pushed it too far. So that's with that disclaimer. But it is kind of crazy if you're doing a lot of the stuff and you're healthy enough to move and get that going. I always did the stuff outside as well for the most part. You can get away with even more sometimes, but I feel like I'm also very lucky. I don't hear as many people like me who could get away with being keto at 75 grams of carbs. So
yeah. So, I mean, a lot of that does come down to the math of how much are you burning,
sure.
Versus how much are you taking in. So there is still an element of, calories in, calories out. However, we now know that the calories in, calories out is not the only factor. And so it is a bigger picture too of stress. And so if you have a stressful lifestyle, then keto can actually bring more stress to your body if it's not done correctly or well.
Yep, fair enough. Jason, you'll be our last question here. Thank you, sir. What tests do you look at for nutrient deficiencies and toxic load? Oh, what am I doing as an FDN? I should have asked this. So yes, what tests do you like?
So I use a hair test for toxic burden load. There's a variety of tests. We can actually test urine for different toxins. However, for what I'm looking at, I want to look at more of like a longitudinal picture, not an acute picture. So if you are going through like a chelation protocol, for example, meaning like you are on agents that are pulling those heavy metals out of the tissues and the blood that are being excreted, then we'll use urine testing to test how much is coming out. but that doesn't necessarily give us an idea of where you're starting. So I like to do hair testing for that starting point. How much is stored in your body? And the hair is a great way to test that because of just the nature of how it's excuse me, expressed. And obviously, like, your hair is a long growth process. So that's what I use for that. And then for nutrient deficiencies, I use a blood serum test. And so that's super simple and easy to do.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. Somehow we're already at 50 minutes. This one flew by. Thank you for being an awesome guest. Where can people find you if they would like the best of like three worlds here, it seems? So you got this Western background, interested in functional medicine and the lab testing, and then also recognize the power of energy and stuff. I feel like you're the perfect mix of a practitioner. So where can people find you if they'd like to learn more about working with you?
I'm at drlaramay.com. So DRLARAMAY.com. I'm on all the socials at Dr. Lara May, except for TikTok. I have FXN Med after my handle on TikTok. So yes, thank you.
All right. And we'll have that in the show notes for you guys, for those on audio, of course. So Dr. Lara, our final question for today, it's the signature question on the show. And I know we've been talking a lot about insulin resistance and diabetes. It can be about really anything. And I feel like you're one of the perfect types of people to answer this. So the question is, if we could give you a magic wand, you could wave it, and you could get every single one of our viewers and listeners to do just one thing for their health. So that means you can get us to all start doing one thing, or you can get us to all stop doing one thing. What is that one thing that you would get us to do?
Oh, wow. Start or stop? I think if I could wave the magic wand and get us all to start doing one thing, it would be meditation. And even if it's just for 5 to 15 minutes of sitting still and quiet and just tuning in and listening to your breath. I mean, the power of meditation for our body, our mind, and our spirit is almost is too great to really quantify or put words to. And I know we didn't talk a lot about that piece of it today, but that's where I would say if I could get everyone to start doing something, it would be that.
Awesome. Especially in today's world where it's literally possible, especially for the young people now, to from the day that they are born until the day that they die, they can go 24/7 and never have a second actually stopping, right? It's constant stimulation. So probably more important than ever before. So thank you so much. And we appreciate you coming on.
Thank you so much